Hi everybody, Simon Weiniger here. I've decided to do like an instructional video. Right now the coronavirus or COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, is running rampant. I don't know about that. There's only 66 cases in Utah right now, but we're all relegated to our homes. And it, if that helps the situation, in the future, I think that's a good thing. Anyway, either way, we're stuck at home doing nothing. I'm sure you're all doing stuff, but anyway, wanted to provide an opportunity for anyone who wants to learn how to paint. It's going to do a short instructional video, not short, probably going to be a long instructional video. I've done some time-lapse stuff before, and every once in a while I'll do little snippets, but I've never done a full-length instructional video for free before. I've got a couple of them out there that are floating around that were a subscribe type situation. But anyway, I thought this would be a cool thing to do. A lot of people suffering from not only being sick, but loss of income and jobs and stuff like that, and I couldn't think of a whole lot of ways to pay that back except for to provide you with some knowledge, honestly, some relaxation. Painting's great. Anyway, wanted to give it a start on this real quick. This isn't going to be any kind of professional anything. It's just going to be me talking and giving you an idea of what we're doing. Okay, so I've pulled an image. This is a photograph that I took actually a few years ago. And what I wanted to do was turn this into just a nice little painting. Now, to start out, let's kind of discuss what's going on here, what we might be able to do with this image. I really like it. And for any of you that are following along, it might actually be helpful. See my stuff up there. I think it would be beneficial to maybe send you the image itself. So if you're interested in that, if you're on Facebook or Instagram and you follow my stuff, Simon Weiniger Fine Art, I can either direct message you this image or any other images that you need, or any material supplies or anything like that. Shoot, if you just have any questions, just let me know. I'm happy to help. So I can send you this image, or if you'd like, I also have an email address, simonweiniger@yahoo.com or info@weinigerfineart.com. So I can send it that way also. Anyway, back to the image. This is what we're looking at. So what I like about this image is that, this dips here, throws our interest down this area. This shadow kind of throws our attention this way. And that roof kind of gently moves it back this way. So there's kind of this back and forth rocking feel to how the image is set up. One thing that I want to do, because this is a very confusing area, I'm probably going to eliminate that and put a stand of trees in here that will keep you from running off the edge of the canvas. Maybe even a taller one in here, so that your attention does go like this and this and this, and then it stops right around this area here. Because this is really where we want to be visually. That's where we want to hang out. And, I might want to move this back and forth a little bit just to decide, where that feels better. I'll probably reinforce these trees a little bit. It looks like there's a couple of different trees, but I think I might unify that, make it one block of tree, just like one piece, and then bring something over here. I do like all of this. I really like the deep, this dark shadow. This stuff's confusing again. Probably get rid of that. This I'll probably leave. I don't know if I'm going to put this roof line in, but I may. This looks like it's a chicken coop of some kind, which I think is kind of cool. I definitely like these fence pieces and all of this mess in here. I think that's really neat. This is really our center, our interest area, and so anything you can do to make those stand out and still be interesting, we want to do. Yeah, I think we're ready to go. Sorry, I just bumped that. Now, I'm not going to be going back and referencing the photo a whole lot, simply because it'd be a lot of back and forth. But from this point on out, I think we're just going to deal with, the canvas up here. Maybe once in a while I'll pan back, but generally you're probably gonna want an image of that. So just contact me, I'll get it for you. So this is a fairly small image that we're gonna do of it, and we're not gonna get too crazy about it. This is meant to be a study, which is kind of a small thing. It's basically a proof of concept type thing. So we're gonna start with just a quick sketch, get an idea of where we're gonna go with it. This natural horizon line here is going to be a lot lower down on the canvas. And then we've got kind of these mountains up here. I'm gonna push those mountains over just a little bit. I don't like it when one side of the mountains and the other side of the mountains, there's an obvious separation between these two, where this dip is, and I don't want it to be fighting. I don't want one side to be fighting with the other. I don't want to have equal portions of mountain, which they kind of do in the photograph. So I'm going to push that over a little bit to make it a little more interesting. We don't like regularity. We like irregular things, interestingly. I wonder what the psychology behind that is. I've always wondered that. Do we like irregularity because it's imperfect and we're imperfect? I don't know. It's a thought. Look it up. Do some psychology. Okay, so this here, we're talking, that's a shadow for the most part. There's a couple of little highlights right there on the top of the hill, but for the most part, we're just talking about highlights. And then this, there's a couple of really cool blue shadows, like right here in this dip. And then we're looking at tree mass there. This is kind of hard to do without being straight on. I'm trying to keep to the side so you guys can see it better. Okay. We always want to try and get our sketch as accurate as possible, because the problem you run into is if it's not accurate, you're going to start painting, and just accepting your original scale as a blueprint, you're going to think that it's gospel truth, and eventually when you get down the line you realize something's crooked. So you do want to get it pretty accurate to begin with. Trust me, many a times, wow, that's really close. Many a times I've messed that up. Okay, so this, boom, boom, got a door, kind of in this area here. Gotta make the decision. Let's see. Yeah, I think I'm gonna put that chicken coop, that little roof line of the chicken coop in. It's kind of fun. And, fun is just fine. It's a good reason for doing something. It may not be the best reason, but it's a good one. Okay. Kind of like that. Love these little fence pieces in here. With the initial sketch, you don't have to get crazy, because we're going to put darker shadows and washes and stuff over the top anyway. You're going to end up with redoing some of this stuff. I like that farther out. Let's pretend like that's not there. Rub some dirt on it. you guys get that? Rub some dirt on it. When you're a kid and you get an owie, rub dirt on it, it gets all better. Not really, you get infected, don't do it. But that's what we used to do as kids back in the 80s. That's how you fix stuff. You walked it off, you rubbed some dirt on it, you went back, you were just fine. That's why we all have great immune systems. Alright, there we go. Let's see here. So I like that. Something sky related. Let's see here. Kind of like, I think this right here is going to be this is going to be darker, this is going to be darker, this is going to be my light area. Okay, it's a quick sketch. Tree, it's going to be darker, this tree, stand over here, darker, darker in here, going to have some deep shadows up underneath that roof. Yeah, voila. Looks good, right? Sure. All right, our next step, what we're gonna do, let's talk about some of the paints we've got actually. Maybe turn over here for a little bit so we can see my bright smiling face. This is titanium white, that's just what I'm using. You can use any white you want, honestly, just whatever you prefer. These are water-soluble oil paints. Water miscible, they call them different things. Just so you're aware, they're not exactly the same thing as traditional oils. They're not. But once they're dry, they're effectively the same thing. What they've done is they take oil paints and they've added a binder to it so that binder will communicate, I guess, with a water molecule and an oil molecule. Anyway, it's kind of a vehicle in order to, thin out, to move the paint from one thing to another. So I'm using water soluble. You can use whatever you want. Oil, acrylic. This would translate pretty well on all those. Probably less so watercolor because you do different steps in different ways. So, I'm just going to tell you exactly what I have and why. I've got 2 yellows, 2 reds, 2 blues, okay? And then I've got, this is burnt sienna, and then I've got, this is just a white. The reason I do that is because each one of my yellows and reds and blues, I'm just using primary colors. But I've got a cool one and a warm one and a cool one and a warm one. So, I mean, I guess I could have put them in order, but I didn't. So I've got a warm and a cool of each of the primary colors, because it just works better that way. People always ask me why you don't use a lot of browns or blacks or even like greens. And the reason is that they're all mixable, generally. I mean, our pigments aren't perfect, so we can't get every color. That's why a lot of people do use some of those other colors. But generally speaking, this is kind of the minimum that I think you should use, because you can't, honestly, because it's hard to get to the point where you understand your color palette. And I think part of the problem with some artists is they start out with way too many, and they aren't able to learn them so well that it's like, understanding the palm of your hand. You know what it looks like. It's ingrained in your head so well. It just becomes muscle memory. So if you learn these basic colors, after you know them so well, you can add whatever you want. But to start out with a huge wide array of colors is not super helpful, because it just ends up with a lot of confusion. You're not able to learn your palette very well. And these are kind of the basics. It's kind of what you need unless you're doing a limited palette. This is a great start. Greens, you can mix any green you want to, for the most part. So this is a light cad yellow. This is a deep cad yellow. Burnt sienna. This one is, I believe it's medium. medium cadmium red. This is a permanent alizarin crimson. This one is ultramarine blue. And then this one here, usually I've got a phthalo blue because that's what I prefer, but I actually just ran out and that's a Prussian blue. Prussian blue is the warmer version of blue, and sorry, I'm doing a video, but studio interruptions. See, that's how it's not professional. What was I saying? Yeah, Prussian blue. I actually don't like Prussian blue because it doesn't retain its color permanence as long. And phthalo blue is such a natural, such a powerful color that I really love being able to use that when needed. A couple of warnings: the Prussian and phthalo and the alizarin crimson are very strong. Less alizarin crimson, but phthalo blue is one of the strongest colors you can get. Be careful. Just use little teeny tiny bits. Okay, let's get to it. Let's see if I can get this thing better situated. You're gonna get some shadows cast on there, and I apologize for that in advance. Let's see here. Okay, so basically over here, since these are water soluble, I'm just using water. I also have a medium that I use, and this is really just my favorite medium. I've tried lots of them. This is, for water soluble, the painting medium from Artisan. This just seems to be a fantastic medium. It doesn't act funky while it's drying. It doesn't create a skin. It just works very, very well, I think. Okay, so you're gonna need yourself some paper towels, obviously something to clean your brushes out. I will also end up using knives, like a painting knife. These are great. You don't have to use them. They're just stylistic and surface tools. So basically I use them to create textures and stuff like that. Okay, so the first thing that we're gonna do, we're gonna find our shapes of shadows. Find our darkest darks. So I'm gonna take some ultramarine blue, add a little bit of alizarin crimson. The cool thing about that is, so if you ever look at in nature, you see something really dark, a lot of people say, okay, that's black, but in a natural world, you really don't have black, because black ends up, so there's in the natural world, there's always a temperature to your light source. So if your light source is warm, usually what ends up happening is your shadows end up having a lack of warmth because it's lacking that warm light, right? So you would end up with cooler shadows. And if you have a cool light source, then you're going to end up with the exact opposite. So one thing we deal with a lot of times is darks that actually have a color temperature, a color note to them. So what we want to do is make sure that we're not using black that's devoid of color. We want rich and interesting color shapes. And so we want to use, basically what I do is I do the blue, which is ultramarine blue, and alizarin crimson, and I'll mix those together and they get really nice deep shadow colors. If I want it cool, I add more blue. If I want it warm, I add more red. If I need to neutralize it a little bit, I add either burnt sienna or burnt umber. I actually tend to use burnt umber a little bit more. I issue you a warning for that because you don't want to kill your shadows as much as possible, because when you do add a little bit of that, it destroys them, it ruins them, it kills them color-wise. So if you can see that, these are quite purple, but they're actually really cool purple. So all I'm doing is I'm taking a big brush. I mean, for the size of painting, it's a decent sized brush. It's probably like half, 3/4 inch, probably 3/4 inch wide. And I'm just putting in nice strokes. Ah, I lost my image. Turn back on, computer. Okay, so we're putting in basically where we're going to have shadows or deep colors. If you look at something and you can tell that it's got an undertone, like in the trees, you do have like shadow spots in it. If you have any of that, what you want to do is put some of those shadows in first. Okay, so here's an issue. This tree here comes down almost to the segment, this point right between these two roof lines. So we don't like that visually. What we want to do is we want to push that one way or the other. I think I'm going to push it up so that when that comes down, it's not going to go right to the apex. We don't like things in tangent. We don't like things to meet at a single point unless you have a reason to do that. And a lot of times there is a reason to do that. But if we want to naturalize things, if we want things to feel like they're real and natural, then we usually want to avoid that kind of stuff. General rule, bigger brushes are better. At least at the beginning. And the reason being is that we are not supposed to be working with details right now. We're supposed to just be putting large basic shapes in. And using large brushes helps us remember that. Now that being said, I tend to overdo it a lot of times. Now you just want to block stuff in. You don't need details, and but you don't want to rub out any of your sketches. I mean, the sketch can be gone, but you need to know where your indication lines are, where things exist, essentially. Okay, another thing I'm going to throw up in there. The reason I keep going back over here is because I'm grabbing water and or medium so I can thin stuff out. So generally on the lower base layers on our painting, we don't want to use medium so much. We want to use, in this case, water or linseed or turpentine or something like that. Not linseed, turpentine. Because our lower layers need to be low on oil-based stuff. And that's just because if we don't, we crack the surface. It's about drying, and different drying rates can mess up our painting, and we don't want to mess up our painting. So you want the darks to be thin, and we do our darks first, and then we build up to our light colors. The reason being is that when we're doing light colors, so light colors jump out at us, and they should, because they're the ones that are dramatic and obvious, and the dark colors are supposed to recede. And if we build it in such a way that the dark colors go down first, then the light colors are built on top of it, we end up with the correct formula for those bright, shiny, vibrant colors jumping out at us because they're on the top surface. If we were to build our painting so that the darks were on top, we would actually end up with an unnatural feeling setup, because it would be wrong, because our shadows shouldn't be jumping out at us. Now there's a caveat to that. I'm sure there's a lot of caveats, but if you're doing watercolor, generally speaking, you do watercolor the opposite. You start with your lights and then you work toward your darks. And that's okay with watercolor, because watercolor is really, it's not paint so much as it's a stain for your paper. So there's not a layering effect. You're not actually building anything on top of anything. You're just staining paper. So that doesn't actually break our rule that we want to have light things on top of the surface and dark things, farther down inside. If that makes any sense at all. Okay, this guy, boom, boom, boom. See, trying to keep loose for you guys. but still do it slow enough you can follow along. Fast enough that you don't get bored. You know, the sweet spot. Yeah, I just use my finger. I do that sometimes. You really shouldn't, especially with cats and stuff like that. You can get cancer and go crazy and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Just for the heck of it, I'm going to put that line in. You see how I've pretty much just used the same color the whole time? Why would that be? I'll tell you. For one thing, we like to create harmonies. And in the natural world, especially outdoors, which I guess is the definition of the unnatural world, things tend to harmonize because they're lit by the same light source. When you get inside or you get, in heavily populated street areas, that can change because you end up with different light sources. Generally speaking, you're outside, unless you're dealing with some artificial light, which you usually don't during the day. Usually it's all just natural light. You're dealing with a singular light source, and when that happens, they tend to all have a lot of the same qualities. And that's what we're trying to accomplish, is getting a lot of the same qualities overall. Alright, so one thing we also want to keep in mind is loosen up a little bit, We just, sometimes people are just super scared. I'm keeping this paint super thin. I mean, this is like, that stuff will stick on your canvas so quick, and you won't have to worry too much about putting layers on top. But you'll have to deal with it. We'll have to deal with what's called a wet-on-wet technique, because there's going to be wet layers and then, wet layers built on top of those wet layers. So we'll deal with that in the future. This is Masonite, and I've painted it with a gray gesso. It's not middle gray, it's a little bit lighter than that. You probably can't tell so much in this video, but these are both the same as far as them. They're both gray. The reason I do that is because when you paint on a canvas that's extremely colored, it messes up how you can judge those colors, because it readjusts the rods and the cones in your eyes, so that you can't necessarily judge colors correctly. So one reason it's a good idea not to paint on straight white is because your painting changes, because you're compensating for that extra white. So a lot of times you just want to get some paint down on there so that your eyes can judge the paint correctly. In this case, like I said, I did that, but sometimes people will put a really strong color down and then start building their painting on top of that, and it does create a harmony, but it also keeps you from being able to judge correctly what you're doing. Okay, so we've got our shadows, we've got our trees. You can kind of see a nice outline here. The next thing that I want to do is try and well, a couple of things. I'm going to want to identify where our strongest light and our strongest dark is going to be. Because anywhere we have a strong light and dark next to each other is where our attention wants to go. And in my picture, generally, I mean, there was these buildings over here and there was a light spot on that building, but I got rid of those. So kind of right here where that door is, and where this edge, this right here, is kind of where that location is. Here's another spot where that happens. So centrally located right here. So that's a good thing. I think what I want to do is keep this a little more mild and punch it up a little more over here. And the reason I want to do that is because our attention is going here, 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 and it stops about there. Because these trees kind of keep it contained, keep our attention from going too far. And you just kind of go around this area right here, right? Well, if I punch up this spot right there, brighten that, darken this, keep it interesting, and then I'll have these little fence pieces that are crisscrossing it. That becomes a really interesting spot to look at. And I think I'm going to do that. I don't love that it's really centrally located. I almost want it over here a little bit more, but you know, I'd have to move the whole house and that would change the whole composition. And right now I kind of like that where it's at. So I think it's going to be all right. We might have to alter some of the ground patterns to get it to feel more natural. I mean, even put some dark. We'll see. I don't know. These are all the things you need to think about while you're painting and not at the end of your painting when you're like, oh wait, look what I did, I screwed up. You want to always be asking questions. Because everything you do in a painting changes the whole painting. Every stroke you put in makes the stroke next to it, and the one next to that, and the one next to that do something else, do something different. Every manipulation manipulates everything. Okay, so a lot of this stuff in the sky is green. Now, when I say green, you're automatically going to be like, oh, where's green? I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. You wouldn't do that. So they're green, but they're not real green. They're just kind of greenish. One thing that I notice a lot of people think that things that show up in green, especially in the mountains, they aren't actually as green as you might think they are. They just appear to be green, and our mind fills that information in and says, hey, yeah, that's green. But it's probably a lot less than you think. So that's actually a pretty mild green up in those mountains. And we're just going to scrub this in a little bit, just so it's there. I want to get it pretty dang close, but I also don't want to worry too much about it, because we're putting base colors in. These are washes that are kind of giving us an idea of where stuff goes, essentially. And we're trying to start putting basic areas in so that our eyes are ready to judge color, our final color, you know, selections. So that's kind of cool, right? We kind of just put a whole mountain in. Next thing we're going to want to probably do, and everybody can do this a little bit different. It's not like this is there's a hard and fast rule to this necessarily, but we need to put some color in the ground too, so that we can judge all that's happening with that building and the ground. Kind of like that. There's some really cool colors right in here. Those will be fun. They're very spring, wet green colors. And that'll be cool. And then, if you have the image, I hope you do, the trees up here tend to have a little bit warmer green. Maybe even bordering on an orange. And when you're dealing with greens, you're really never dealing with green. You're dealing with different versions of yellow or blue, or people always want to take green, and it almost never happens. There's so many different subtle variations of green. Some are bordering on blue, some are bordering on yellow, some are really brown. So we're just going to fiddle around in here a little bit, knock those purples down, give us an idea a little bit where we're going to head in the future. In the future. Okay, I grabbed me another brush. You're going to hate me. All my brushes are dirty right now because I've been working. This is actually a flat. I'm not sure you can see that right there. It used to be a flat. Now it's more like a filbert. Filbert is a tapered flat. So I'm going to use that real quick, and I'm going to try and get something that looks a little bit like that roof. Maybe something in that range there. And we might not be perfect. Actually, I'd prefer to put it in a little bit darker and then ramp it up to make it lighter. So that way we can actually put some interest in that roof line. And what I mean by that is, you know, this is a metal roof. Sometimes if we're able to put in something a little bit darker and then put a couple of strokes that are lighter on top of it, it makes it look like those roof panels exist, like they're physically there instead of, and also creates some texture and gives us some interest in that roof. So right now this is kind of just dry brush, scrubbing it on. I do that a lot. I know it's terrible. A lot of people don't do that, but a lot of people say that's a terrible habit, and they're probably right. But you know what, honestly, however you want to apply paint, you just go ahead and do it. You want to use your finger, you go ahead and do it. As long as you can get the effect you're looking for. Everybody's got their own way of applying. I tend to use a lot of different methods that create textures, because texture to me is awesome. And I think more and more people are starting to appreciate texture based on the fact that reproductions have become so real. But it's hard to create textures in a reproduction, and so when people see real texture to a painting nowadays, it feels so authentic. Whereas before printing became so prevalent, I think people actually appreciated the opposite. I think they appreciated how perfect and flawless it could be, because that didn't exist. I mean, they weren't printing things. Things couldn't be flawless, so anytime you did something that was like so perfect, it was highly respected because it didn't exist. You know, people tend to like what is rare. That's me talking philosophy again. Dang, it's hard to get that roof line straight without... I'm gonna get in your way for a sec. Okay. Cool. You know what? I think I gotta lengthen that bad boy. Now this is something you're gonna be doing while you're painting, is you've got to nip and tuck and push and pull. That'll do. I think. That is a lot longer than it seems. Okay. That's right, I talk to myself. I actually talk to myself a lot. I think it happens when you spend most of your time in your own company. It's a concern, maybe, if you don't talk to yourself, because you're gonna start to go crazy. I mean, even Tom Hanks had Wilson when he was on that deserted island, because I think it kept him from going crazy. Obviously, if you have multiple personalities, that's a problem, but... I don't have multiple personalities, usually. Haha, it's funny. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm putting more of this, this shadow in. It's just, you know, too thin and see-through. It's just going to take a lot of attention away. And it's milder than that shadow was originally, but don't put a lot of paint in here. Matter of fact, it's fine to leave it a little scratchy. It's kind of cool. Creates texture and interest and stuff. But you don't want it thick. You want to keep that pretty thin, like the actual quality of the paint. I don't like making things look perfect, so I always try to just put it in so that it feels a little textured. So that's what I'm doing now. See, there's a little bit going on there, not too much. I don't want my attention to go to that shadow, I really don't. Now, this does change as it hits this other mountain. This mountain dips in here. So you do get a shift, a transition. And it's still very similar, but it's gonna be a slight change. You see how that changed just a little bit from one to the other? Do I have a Bob Ross voice? Hobby trees? Probably not. Alright, so we get that bad boy in there. We don't really need to worry as much about the shape. Put the shape in as accurate as possible, but we're going to come back through in here and cut the top coat of this mountain with the lighter stuff anyway. So you're going to change that in the future. I don't like that mark, it was too light. Okay. Okay, the thing at this point that I want to work on the most is this building. The reason you want to work on that building is because you want everything else to work for the building, right? So we want to do the building first and then make everything else work for that. I mean, up to this point, we've tried to make the whole painting communicate with itself, which is good because we're creating harmonies, and we want a painting that's unified and not broken. I'm not sure if everybody understands what I mean by a broken painting, but a broken painting doesn't fit within itself. Its environment doesn't, like some of the elements don't fit within its environment. So we kind of want the whole painting to evolve together so that they can communicate, that they understand one another, all of it. So that's what we've been doing up to this point. But now we want to start focusing on certain elements, the important elements, so that we can get those correct, and then the rest of the painting can match those elements. Because the important elements are important. We got to do those not quick. We got to do them early on so that they're correct. And that's what we're gonna do now. Dang, what happened there? Okay, yeah. Okay, so one cool thing, I keep trying to go to my other palette. One thing that I really like on this image is right by this door, there's this little splash of, it's a really warm thing going on right there. And what I want to do is take a little bit of alizarin crimson and put it in here. And then take my brush. Oh, that's not a good brush. Not that brush. Let's try a different brush. This is a softer brush. This one's I don't even know what it is. It's actually a synthetic, but it's a lot softer. Because I keep dragging, I keep ripping the paint up. So I'm gonna put that in, boom, like that. Again, didn't work the first time very well. I'm gonna go like this. Boom, boom. Yes. Oh, it's more green than that. When I say green, I don't mean really green. I just mean less warm in this particular case. So I'm going to put that right there. I really want this to read well. It's killing me. So what I want to do now is, after I've got colors that have slashed out sideways, I want to take a little bit of this shadow and drag it. Drag it. Drag it down. You see what happened there? You ended up with this really cool transition. So we put colors in like this, and then we went and pulled it down. And it actually gave us a really cool, like, faded little deal right there. Then I just touched up a little bit the edges. We're gonna end up going back and putting some other stuff in, but I think maybe, yeah, put a little bit of that in sideways. All right, I'm just gonna leave it there for now. Okay, one of the lighter areas we have is over on this side. So this is a really mild yellow. It's not bright, it's not dark, it's just kind of there. This brush is not the best brush out there. Okay, so I kind of like that. This face here I put in earlier, I want to go over and add some stuff to that. Like a little bit lighter, and then just drag some stuff down. So especially over here, it seems like there's some secondary light or some kind of staining on the side of that building. It's giving us a really cool reflective quality just over there. I'm going to drag it all down because it gives us, I think it's made out of corrugated steel, and it looks like it's up and down. So that gives us kind of that feel that it's corrugated steel. A feel that it's steel. That's right, I rhymed. Now I want to put a dark right along that roof line. Just like that. Maybe even on this other side too. Like that. Maybe we can drag a couple of these things down. Now that's a kind of cool, right? I guess. Okay, now we're going to deal with that chicken coop roof. Deal with it all nice and neat. Man, I say stupid things when I paint. Sorry. You'll get over it. I mean, come on, this is a free program. What can you expect? I'm going to say some stupid things. And they're not going to get edited out. It's just the way it's going to be. But I hope you enjoy it anyway. Okay, so I'm building that roof in much the same way that I do with this other one. You know, kind of put some lines in, drag some stuff down. The roof, this chicken coop is interesting. There's pieces of wood sticking out all over the place. So as best as I can tell just by looking at it, there's this roof, and then there's a main joist, whatever you want to call it, main beam running through the apex of that roof. And it extends, it appears that it extends, but it doesn't actually hold the top, it's not right quite at the apex. Oh, it looks like it's right here. It's coming out. So those are actually holding the roof up, and they're actually extended beyond the roof out into this territory. I assume maybe the chicken coop so that part of it's open and part of it's enclosed. But I'm not entirely sure why they built it that way, but we're gonna try and build one that's kind of like that. It doesn't have to be exact, but you know, something similar. Seems like there's a piece of wood here, another one there. Maybe some horizontals. It is definitely interesting. And then most of these are made up of dark little panels. Normally what I would have done is actually put the dark in first, but I didn't. It's amazing how you can just do whatever you want as an artist. Maybe that's why artists are control freaks. I'm just kidding, they're not control freaks. But we do kind of like that we get to control our own domain, you know? That's the cool thing about creation. No one can really say it's wrong. Not in the artistic sense, anyway. I mean, yeah, you could build a building that might fall over, and they'll say it's wrong from a structural standpoint, but they can't say that it's wrong. They could just say that it's a bad, you know, structure. It won't stay up. I mean, lots of people have created really cool things that fell over. See, I told you I'd say dumb things. Okay. Yeah, so some of these, there's actually a fence line. Let's get one right there. And you'll notice that there's an undercurrent here of blue, because these fence pieces, they appear to be metal. That kind of gives you that idea. Or it's weathered wood. And if it's weathered wood, they kind of tend to turn blue and purple and stuff like that. So I'm just gonna put some of that stuff in there. Now, one thing you want to keep in mind is when there's a hole through something, like right here, you're looking at that and they're bright and shiny, and they're not supposed to be. Anything that's a small hole that looks into a backdrop actually needs to be restrained and more mild than the thing behind it. And I always try to describe to people, if you take your hand and you look through between the slits in your hands, you can kind of see through, you know, these holes in your hand, right? Well, if you look at something bright and then you hold it up and look through the slits, you'll notice that it's darker looking through the slits. Okay, that's because as the light passes through those slits, it's bouncing around between your fingers, and it actually it ruins the light. It lowers the light because it has to reflect and refract, and it mixes it all up. So they actually get darker when that happens. So you want to be careful not to make holes be too bright. Now, the easiest way to see that is with trees. You know, when your holes are shining through a tree. But the best way to show someone is with your fingers. And do it just to make sure that you understand that I'm not lying about it. It actually does happen. Yeah, this is too strong. I don't like that point. And I didn't like how that paint was on that brush. I also don't like how teeny and crappy this brush is. I'm gonna have to get a new one. Okay, now I want to put that other roof line in real quick. I love how bright the roof line is toward the end here, because that gives me some contrast with the shadow. See that? Makes our roof pop a little bit. But it does get darker as it moves to the left. So let's darken it up. Oh, that's just boring. Okay, and after I've got the colors in correctly, what I want to do, is just for the sake of interest, is go back in here and go boom, boom, boom. Makes that roof so much cooler. Yeah. Yeah, I like that, actually. There's a couple of dark spaces in here that I don't have that I kind of neglected. So I'll put a couple of those dark spaces in there. Just make sure when you're dealing with these little tiny brushes, which I really shouldn't be using right now, but you make sure that they don't look super contrived. You know what I mean? Contrived in a painting usually doesn't look that great. Like it required lots and lots of effort to put it in. So this is a really cool little technique. Anytime you're dealing with horizontal or vertical shapes that might catch the light a little bit, you just put in a little indication. Bah. Little push, little pull. And in this case, it's literally a pull. Da-dunch. Alright. Where I'm at's pretty cool. Yeah, pretty cool. Alright, let's put a little bit of secondary light back in here where this door meets up with that left panel. Don't go crazy, because it kind of looks nice at this point. I like it quite a bit. You don't need to paint everything. A lot of times, actually, it's a stronger painting when you leave things to the imagination. So some of this area in here isn't rendered 100%. And it's in the shadow, and that's okay, because shadows recede, we don't notice a lot of things, and our mind tends to fill in those shadows because it actually, our minds usually appreciate those shadows being unrefined because we like to have unexplored territory. So if we leave those shadows a little bit raw, a little rough, our mind fills it in, and we like that because we don't want everything given to us in a painting. It seems like we like some we like some mystery. We like some. I mean, we need enough to get there intellectually that we understand what's going on, but a lot of times some of the times when you leave it out, it's every bit as powerful. Okay. Now, we've got a lot of stuff going on right in here that I'm gonna have to make up a little bit. So I want to get rid of this part of that fence. And I want to put in a little bit of that background because that's where I want my attention to be. I think if I put a little bit of that right there, so that I know that that's my center of interest, and then work around that, I think that's going to work out nice. Excuse me. That scare you? Okay, so I'm just splashing that in real quick. Where's that? Just that one pole. Now the reason that pole stops right here is because this upper section is in shadow. Does that make sense? Now it's not rendered exactly like it shows in the picture, because I think I'm a better artist than I'm just kidding. I'm a better artist than whoever created that. I just like how that reads a little bit better. Okay, so now I'm gonna deal with this tree. Dang it, give me another brush. Okay, so that phthalo or Prussian, a little bit of that darker yellow orange stuff. And this tree seems more distant to me than the rest of them. So what I'm going to do, lighten it up just a hair, and then start putting that bad boy in. Cutting around that pole is very important. You don't have to take your time, but you gotta have steady hands, because that's in a very important part in our painting. A lot of times we like to alternate strokes, especially in things natural like trees, because trees aren't regular. They're not lollipops. I mean, when was the last time you actually saw a lollipop tree? They don't really exist. Trees grow wild. They have all kinds of different stuff. Even the manicured pruned ones, unless they're like, I don't know, on the grounds of Disneyland, they're probably going to be really a lot more interesting than that. See, now I got to figure out what I'm going to do between this grass and these trees. Do we want to take the trees all the way down, or do we want to generate some interest there? Do we want to have like fence lines or something like that? I don't know. But what I'm thinking currently, and this might change down the road, is to just put in some brush. Now, that's my choice. You can do something else. It's entirely up to you. You might even want to come back here and be like, bloop, bloop. Somebody's going to enjoy that. Bloop, bloop. See, this can either be like, you know, tall grasses, They could be, I mean, just junk and garbage and, you know, stuff. Kind of cool, kind of cool. One thing I like to do when I'm painting is generally what we want to do is draw our attention from, keep it from going outside of, you know, toward the edges of the canvas. So we're going to want to direct our attention toward our main focus point. Now, one of the ways that we can do that is when we're doing the foreground, is to darkening out the edge, you know, near the edges. And that's actually a natural thing anyway, because like, especially like when you look down, when you're looking at a natural scene, you look down, there's not as much, I mean, we look at the ground, but like we don't get like great highlights usually. It's usually as we're looking up onto the horizon, we start to see, you know, really great highlights. So it kind of happens anyway, but sometimes we can artificially darken a little bit toward the edges so that it directs our attention in toward our central focal areas. And the interesting thing is, that tends to be one thing that landscape painters do, but if you look at what figure painters do, they do the opposite. They tend to blow out the edges white, because as you get closer, they tend to darken around the figure, immediately around the figure. And then, since it's dark around the figure, they bleed it out so that the figure is highlighted against the backdrop, but then the interest fades away. So it's kind of the exact opposite when you do it with painting. Actually noticed that with a friend of mine, Howard Lyon. We were doing a thing in California, and I asked him about that, and he's like, "Huh, that's true. I've never thought about it." And I hadn't either until that point. I mean, I knew landscape artists did it. I just never really paid attention to the difference. I always kind of figured that was a thing that you know, figure artists did too, but they tend to do it opposite. And not always, depending on, well, I'm moving all over the place, aren't I? You know, depending on what they're trying to accomplish and what if their figure's in light or dark. But usually figures tend to be more in the light, you know. Okay, so one thing I like to do, this isn't usually the stage at which I do this, it's usually kind of one of the last things I do, is I use a knife, and then I put in texture into the foreground. And that's actually kind of hard to do on a little tiny painting like this without holding it. But I don't want to screw up your video, so I'm going to try and keep it on the easel right now. Oops. It's so hard. Okay, so I like some of this area here to be a lighter. Alright. Okay, next let's fiddle around with these mountains a little bit. Make them look more realistic. And the sky. Maybe I'll do the sky now. The sky's pretty grayed out, honestly. A little bit of stuff in my paintbrush. I didn't clean it out good enough. It's yellowing it down a little bit, which actually sometimes is okay, but sometimes is not. It's not bothering me right now, but okay. So one of these, your sky transitions usually from dark and warm up top, and then it transitions down. And it also transitions from side to side. Usually one side of your sky is going to be lighter than the other, depending on your light source, depending on what's going on with the cloud cover. You know, there's lots of different factors, but that's kind of what happens. You don't have to make the sky perfect. I actually kind of like a dramatic, dynamic sky. So that's what I'm doing. Put some bright in here, because that's where my clouds are kind of, you know, the light's kissing them right there. Yeah, most of this, I mean, there's not much to say about it, just putting strokes in, you know. One thing that, if you look at this sky, there's kind of these spots up here where the light is hitting it. And that's kind of cool. I mean, I've obviously changed my sky from the original. We can use some of these interesting things in the original picture, incorporate them. I did it so that more of my attention is drawn this way, and then back down. I'm like, you know, like that. This goes this way, this goes this way, this goes this way, this goes this way. It's cool. It's like a rocking motion. We like rocking motions. I think it goes back to babyhood. Pull that in, cut that back. If we don't like our edges, we can push and pull. So we put this paint in, we put this paint in, and then we can like play around. We like playing with edges, because it makes things more interesting.
Can Viv play? Max is here.
Sorry. Can we talk about it in a few minutes?
What?
I'm doing a video right now. Leave it alone, please. How about I come in a few minutes, we'll talk about it? Okay? Sorry about that. It's my baby girl. She's the sweetest thing in the world. Extremely social. I mean, I'm not antisocial by any stretch of the imagination, but like, she lives for sociality. It's kind of cute. tell you what I really love. There's this piece of yellow right here. Just a little fade. Very interesting. Okay. And then, if you look at the photograph, we have atop this mountain here a little bit of like a warmer sienna color. We're just going to fade that a little bit. Like a zit. I actually want to take a little bit of blue. I feel like there's more blue in that. Yeah. You see, as the mountains recede, they get more blue. And it just has to do with the frequency of color. Blues are the last thing to drop out, generally. So as things go more distant, they get more blue. And that's kind of what we're trying to accomplish here. More distant, more blue. But then the light, you know, when it kisses the top of those mountains, actually shifts the ability of that frequency to exist. Because the light changed. Alright, that's kind of cool. Okay. Now I'm going to try and do is get this mountain here all taken care of. There's not a lot to it, honestly. It's mostly just greens and yellows. They're mild, 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 mild. And actually, they almost get red at the top. Yeah, a little bit of red up there. Okay. So this guy right here, get some of that. Maybe a slice down there. Get some red down here. Then we don't just want red in that area because it actually has kind of a bright spot. It's a bright spot. Okay, and this down here, it's kind of funny muddy. Kind of nondescript, funny, ugly, muddy. like that a little bit. I'm gonna have to do something down here. It's another choice I've got to make. I'm gonna just put in some distant trees, more distant than that. Okay, you'll notice that these distant trees are kind of blued out a little bit. Made them more blue because they are, in fact, in the distance. And again, you know, with increased distance, things get bluer. Maybe we can put some blues in here too. See, that way it's believable. We've got blues on one side, we got blues on the other side. We feel that distance, you know, showing up. Okay, cool. Cool. I want to deal with this mountain again. I'm gonna have to cool that down a bit. This was definitely done in the spring. Mountains here in Utah are usually not that green. They are really cool though. Okay, so a lot of times when we're doing mountains, the strokes reinforce, you know, the direction that the mountain, the orientation of the mountain. So it's almost like mountains are a lot like painting fabric. Like there's folds in a fabric and we have shadows and stuff. In this particular case, we don't have a lot of shadows because most of it's in the light, but we do have a couple here. One thing we want to pay attention to is how shadows exist on a mountain. So shadows on a mountain usually have, we're dealing with two factors. One is the shadow cast, like is the reason the shadow there because it's blocking the sun? Or is it because the form, the shape of the actual mountain itself is creating that shadow and it's receding away from the light source? If it's receding away from the light source, like a ball, you know, we have the light over here on the left side. As that ball turns away from the light source, it slowly fades to dark, right? So on this shadow here, this triangular piece is the mountain, and as it rolls over that hill, it slowly would fade to dark. So what we want to do with that side, so we want it to fade. Naturally, that's how it should show up, generally speaking. There's always exceptions, but that's what we're looking for, is a slow fade from one side to the other. Now, the other thing that's happening on the other side of the mountain is it's being cast. Well, let's put this fade in here too. This one's fades, because that is another roll. The other side is a cast shadow, and cast shadows tend to be sharp. They have sharp edges. So that's kind of how those shadows work out. Gentle in the front, sharp in the back. Then I'm going to put this big boy. Now don't remember that, gentle in the front, sharp in the back, because that's not always the way it is. It's not always gentle in the front, sharp in the back. Just use the rules. That's not a saying. Don't use that as a saying. You'll mess yourself up. Now, one thing I think I messed up is that shadow's too dark. We like blue. Mucho mejor. That means it's better. Now one thing I'm trying to do is to naturalize that, make it look more like it's real. Because those other shapes were a little bit sharp, like knives. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Okay. And since I've got some more blues there than we did before, let's put some of those same blues over in this area. We shouldn't have wickedly different shadows usually on the same type of color and surface, you know. So you want to make sure they communicate, they make sense, they're believable. And voila. Now we want to cut back around this tree. And the peak of that building. I feel like there wasn't quite enough shadow. on that side of the mountain. There's just these two random ones, so just thought I'd put in a couple of splashes instead of rando shadows. Alright, get into the tail end here. Now again, this is a study. It's not super duper refined, but I think it's turned into a nice little painting, honestly. I mean, I will refine this before it goes to a gallery, if I decide to send it to a gallery. And get it to the point where I feel like it's 100%. It's really like the last 10% of a painting that makes or breaks it, if you didn't know that. That's why it's so frustrating that you can do 90% of a painting amazingly well and then screw it up right at the end. So let's not do that. So all I'm doing here really is, refining these trees a bit. Kind of how they exist. Their growth habit. That kind of stuff. That spot right there. Okay, I mean, there's still a few things I could do, but I think I'm gonna wait till later. A lot of times you want to leave the detail work to the end. Oh, that's not true. Whoa, hold on. I'm not done yet. And by detail work, I mean just a few of the little, refinements. And I'll tell you, there's a couple reasons why. One, it helps, so the painting's, more dry, and there's more tack to it so that you're able to apply some of those finer details later. But also, when you do a painting, it's almost like writing a book. It's hard to know, things correct, if things are correct or not, until you take a break for a little while. Or even at all. Sometimes you can't quite judge your own painting until you've had some space from it. And when you've had enough time to reset your brain, you can evaluate things more accurately. Not sure if that makes sense to you or not, but we tend to do things perfectly, and we don't realize that we've made mistakes until later on. That's actually the reason why we usually have someone else edit our books or tell us our painting's bad, because we don't always see our mistakes. So at the very least, you need to spend some time away from it and come back and look at it with fresh eyes and, see what we might have screwed up on. there it is. I think we're pretty much there. Let's see if we can get a nicer shot. Well, that's a long video, an hour and 35 minutes. I'll tell you what, if you made it through this whole video, you are a champion. And if you did a painting, you're an even bigger champion. I must say, if you did, I'm impressed and honored, in fact. If you get one done and you are comfortable, which you should be comfortable, send me the image. I'll post it on my Instagram and Facebook accounts. It'll be awesome. I hope there's hundreds. I mean, it probably won't get to hundreds, but if there's a few of you that have done it and you know, want to share that, tag me in your post or send it to me, email it to me, whatever. I'd be happy to promote, you know, what you're doing and let other people see what you've created. It's a weird time. Everybody's stuck in their houses, but I hope you're doing well. I hope financially and physically and emotionally, even socially, you're doing all right. Good luck to you, and maybe we'll do this again.